We are in the middle of summer here in Southern California. It's very warm and hardly soup weather. I like to make soups in the winter time. However, I was fascinated by this recipe for fresh tomato and basil soup. It got me thinking about my childhood. I ate a lot of tomato soup back then, but what did we all eat back then for tomato soup back in the 50s and 60s? It was all Campbell's, which was good. I enjoyed it with lots of saltine crackers. However, I got to thinking, what would a fresh tomato soup taste like? So that's what I want to experiment with today, this fresh tomato and basil soup. I need about 1.5 pounds or 750 grams of ripe tomatoes. This is a 2-pound box. That would be about 1.5 pounds. I took one tomato out to use for salads. I'm going to leave that one in. So this is a little bit more than I need, but an extra tomato isn't going to affect anything. And I need to peel these, so I'm going to cut an X into the bottom of each of these tomatoes. That'll make it easier to peel. I've got water heating to a boil on the stove. The easy way to peel tomatoes is to boil them for a little bit first. I put it on a fork and then just plunge it into the boiling water. Make sure that the water is deep enough to completely cover it. And after about 10 or 15, 20 seconds or so, the skin will be loose because the flesh right under the skin cooks. When you're boiling these, sometimes you'll see that the peel actually start to split, the skin rather. Start to split. That's a good sign that it's going to peel easily. You can see how easy that just lifts right off. Alright, and if you want to seed these, you can. I read somewhere that the juice around the seeds has a lot of flavor to it, and they recommended, the book said, to try to capture the juice. So I'm going to put the seeds in a strainer here, and afterwards I'll push the juice through. You saw me taking the seeds out with a knife. Another thing you can do is just squeeze the tomato and push the seeds out. That works very well too. I'm in the habit of using a knife simply because a lot of times I want to keep my tomatoes whole if I'm using it for say a salsa or something. I don't want to break the tomatoes up too much, but this works very well. Now to capture this juice, what I'm going to do is just push most of this through with my spatula. I get rid of the seeds because supposedly the seeds, especially because they're going to get ground up, would make the soup bitter. Some people like bitter, but I don't. So there's my juice. I'm going to cut my tomatoes up, put those in my bowl, and I'll be ready to start cooking. So there are my chopped tomatoes. I just coarsely chop those. The juice from the seeds is in there. You don't have to be real fussy about how they're going to be chopped because they're going to be cooked down and then blended. If you don't have good fresh tomatoes, or it's not the season for good fresh tomatoes, I would say a can of good San Marzano tomatoes would work fine. A couple of cans maybe for this soup. Meanwhile, I've got more prep work to do. I need to dice a shallot. This is a medium to large shallot. This is probably a more large shallot. That's good enough for my shallot. I'm heating a large pot on the stove. This is actually the bottom of an old pressure cooker. It was a cheap one, a Fager, and it failed. The regulator, the pressure regulator, was plastic and evidently not heat resistant. So there's my tomatoes in there. This is my shallot going in. Again, that's a large shallot. I'm putting in 1 teaspoon of sugar. And then I'm going to put in a couple of tablespoons of tomato paste. That looks good. Generous amount of tomato paste. And then this is 1 tablespoon of white balsamic vinegar. I'm not sure what that's going to do, but as I said, I'm experimenting with this recipe today. And this is 1 1/4 cups, which is about 300 milliliters of vegetable broth or vegetable stock. I bought that in the store rather than make my own. If you do a lot of work with vegetables, save all the trim, put them in the freezer. And then when you get a lot of it, make your own stock. There's recipes for that on the internet. All right, I need to bring this up to the boil, and then I'm going to cover this. I'm going to use the lid that was on this pan. I took out the pressure regulator because that was bad, and I can just use this as a plain lid now, and this is a vent hole for steam. My soup now is just coming to the boil. So as I said, I'm going to put a cover on that. And there's my cover. A little vent hole working there. I'm going to reduce the heat to low, and I'm going to simmer that for 30 minutes. I have about 10 more minutes to go on my soup. So I'm going to prep my basil here. I've got some fresh basil that I've been keeping in water. I need a couple of tablespoons roughly. So I'm going to chop this up. All right, and that can go into my soup when the soup is just done cooking. I also want some basil for a garnish. So I'm going to take my leaves here, those that are good. It's so hard to buy fresh basil this time of year. It seems like, I mean, I can buy it at the farmer's market, but that's not until Sunday. Now, chiffonade is little threads as opposed to strings, which is a julienne. I'm using a ceramic knife for this because supposedly basil turns dark when cut with a metal knife. And this is just going to be for garnish. I want a nice little lacy basil for the top of my soup. Okay, that's good enough. There's my chiffonade, little threads of basil. My soup has been cooking for 30 minutes. I'm going to turn this heat off. I'm trying to avoid steam on my camera lens, which would fog it. I know this is going to need salt. So I'm going to put a pinch of salt in there. Grind some black pepper in there. And then put my basil in there. That's the chopped basil. Then you could transfer this to a blender, let it cool down maybe a little bit to blend it. I have an immersion blender, so I'm going to use this to blend this and make it smooth. All right, that looks good. And then I got my infamous red handle tasting spoon out. Gonna taste this and see if that salt is right. Yes, but maybe a pinch more salt, I think. I'm so ready here to taste my soup. Put a lot in that bowl. A little bit more. Oh, that looks so good. Here's my basil chiffonade. Just put a little sprinkle on top. Doesn't need a lot. Just enough to dress that up. There it is. My fresh tomato and basil soup. Can't wait to see how that's going to taste. I so want to enjoy this, and we're just coming up on lunch, and you saw that this really wasn't difficult to make. This is an easy soup to make. Tastes like tomato soup. Oh, that's good. And I do have to say one thing. I was concerned about the vinegar that went into it. I don't taste the vinegar at all. It must add a little bit of something without announcing itself. Hello, I'm vinegar. This is a good soup. So excuse me, I'm going to go enjoy my lunch. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit my website, mobilehomegourmet.com, and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.